Now let's talk about the ubiquitous data grid. Data grids are obviously a mainstay of data binding scenarios and presenting data collections in tabular form. They are items controls themselves, so all the things we've said about items controls apply to them as well. Data grids are editable. They have an edit mode and a normal mode. When you click in a cell in a row, it goes into edit mode and stays there until you click out of that row. Data grids support dynamic column generation, so they can reflect on the data-bound objects and generate a column for each property on that object. But most commonly, you're going to use static column definitions, setting up exactly what columns you want in the order you want them, bound to the properties you intend. You can also use templated columns, which we'll look into in more detail. Templating really comes in at two different levels. For the column level, it really amounts to cell level. You define a template column, and that's specifying the visual structure of each cell within that column. There are separate templates that you can set for normal versus edit mode, in case you want to toggle, for example, render something as text when you're not in edit mode, and then switch to a combo box when you are in edit mode. There's also a row details template that you can provide on the data grid as a whole, and this lets you provide a data template to render out the child detail for a given row in whatever way that you want. You could render out a data form, a child data grid, or whatever makes sense for your scenario. An important concept surrounding data grids and data binding is to realize that data grid columns are not part of the visual tree. So earlier in this module, we looked at the breakdown of the visual tree and the dynamic generation of items presenters and content presenters, and we saw that there are no columns rendered out as part of that tree. On a data grid column, however, you will declare bindings. Those bindings are actually kind of held aside and used at the point where it goes to render a cell. At the point where the binding is first evaluated, it's when it's parsing the data grid and the columns contained within it. Since that column is not part of the visual tree, things like relative source bindings and element name bindings that try to walk throughout the tree to find the source object are not going to work properly as part of a column. In a demo, I'll show you how you can use templated columns to address that and still have the power and flexibility you need to use relative source or element name bindings when you want as part of a column definition. So let's dive into a demo to get more familiar with all these aspects of data grids.